Thank you all very much indeed for the opportunity to be here this morning. Looking forward to a discussion as much as just a presentation on the issue of a vacant land tax for Wales, but to do that in the broader context of fiscal devolution here in Wales, the way we aim to go about it, and where this particular strand fits into that wider picture of the story so far and where that story may lead over the next few years. In what I'm sure is an over-schematic way, I tend to think of different terms of the Assembly as being characterised by particular sorts of policy preoccupations and events. So we are 10 years this year as the anniversary of the Jerry Holtham report into the Barnett formula, the way that money operates across the United Kingdom, and fiscal devolution really does have its roots in that really important work that Jerry did back then in the 2007 National Assembly term. It was the Holtham review that gave rise to the Silk Commission, which happened in the 2011 Assembly term. And it was the Silk Commission that, in some ways, put the flesh on the bones of some of Jerry's ideas in terms of the extent to which fiscal responsibility should be devolved to us in Wales. And that work of the 2011 Assembly was not just the work of the Silk Commission. It led to the 2014 Wales Act, and it led my predecessor, Jane Hutt, to do a lot of the heavy lifting of fiscal devolution in putting in place the machinery that would be needed in the current Assembly term to actually discharge some of these new responsibilities. So it was while Jane was the Finance Minister, for example, that the Welsh Revenue Authority, the legislation that led to the Revenue Authority, was taken through the Assembly, and I will go from here this morning to the Welsh Revenue Authority to mark the fact that it is exactly 1 year to this month since the first meeting of the Revenue Authority Board. And there's a board meeting today, and I'm going to attend it to mark what I think has been a remarkably successful start to the complex business of creating a new national institution for Wales, and then getting off the ground in April of this year, collecting taxes, making administrative decisions in a way that has not attracted a single headline. And I remember saying to the chair at the start, if you want a measure of success in the job we're asking you to do, it's that you never appear in the newspapers. And other than some properly celebratory pieces about the work of the WRA, it's managed to do that very well. So this is the first ever Assembly term. In fact, as we very often say, the first time for 800 years that taxation decisions that apply in Wales have actually been made in Wales. And we got off to a very modest start this time last year when I laid the draft budget in front of the Assembly in October 2017. I set for the first time rates and bands for Wales in land transaction tax, the successor tax to stamp duty land tax here in Wales. We were able to make it the most progressive form of property taxation anywhere in the United Kingdom. We lifted very large numbers of households in Wales at the bottom end of the income stream out of that property tax altogether, and in order to pay for that, we have increased the rate modestly on those at the top end of the property system. We also set rates and bands for landfill disposal tax, a small tax, a tax designed to be to put itself out of business, because the idea is that by taxing waste going to landfill, you persuade people not to do that, and so the tax diminishes over time. But nevertheless, a very important policy tool, not a revenue-raising tool, but a behavioural tool, and I'll say a bit about that in relation to a vacant land tax in a moment. And earlier this month, I set Welsh rates of income tax for the first time ever, and they will come into force in April of next year. Now, consistent with the messages that we've had from businesses and from others who have an interest in this field, I have taken what I think is a relatively precautionary approach to these things. I regard next year, as far as income tax is concerned, as a year in which we bed the system in, that we try to make sure that the significant changes in the administrative machinery that are required to set Welsh rates of income tax work effectively. Some of you will know that when this happened in Scotland, and we're a year or two behind Scotland in a lot of this, there were a number of people in Tunbridge Wells who received letters from HMRC telling them that they were going to be paying Scottish rates of income tax. I've often thought I would have liked to have been in the room when those letters were opened. And there were people in Scotland who didn't get a letter at all. Now, HMRC tell us that they've learnt lessons from all that experience, and that the introduction of Welsh rates of income tax will be smoother than that. But because you never know at the very beginning of any new change, I have taken the decision not to change rates of income tax here in Wales next year. So if people in Ceredigion never hear about Welsh rates of income tax, but people in Chester do, then it won't matter in a practical sense, because they'll both be paying the same amounts. Thereafter, once the system is bedded in and we are sure that it is working effectively, there will be other decisions for other finance ministers to take, I think, in the next Assembly. Because as I say, if you think of this in Assembly terms, then my view is that this term has been about establishing fiscal devolution, making those early decisions, getting the machinery set up for more significant changes in the future. And as a result of the decisions that the National Assembly will make in this budget round, over £5 billion of the money that is spent on public services in Wales will be raised directly as a result of decisions made in Wales. And that is a real sea change in devolution. We were, for a long time, what people in Scotland used to taunt the original Scottish Parliament as being a pocket money parliament. You know, an institution in which it was given money by somebody else and could then spend it, but had no responsibility for how that money was raised. That is certainly not true here in Wales from April of next year onwards. I wanted just to say for a moment that as well as having the new responsibilities, we have tried to go about discharging them in a different way. So exactly this time yesterday, clock, I was sitting down in the Treasury in London for my meeting with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, in which we rehearse particular Welsh needs and perspectives ahead of the UK government's budget on the 29th of October. If you talk to a Treasury Minister about the budget, you are talking to somebody steeped in the Trappist Buddhist tradition. It is difficult to get the Chief Secretary to confirm whether it's 8:30 in the morning, let alone to tell you anything about what the UK government is planning in their budget, because they are steeped in that Treasury tradition. That tradition that says that secrecy and closed systems and the ability on budget day to pull rabbits out of a hat is somehow some greatly prized skill on a Chancellor's behalf. We really have tried to go about things differently here in Wales. I do not think that that tradition is one that serves us well. It certainly does not serve us well as a devolved United Kingdom, where crucial decisions that will be made in that budget have direct impacts and different impacts on Scotland, on Wales, and indeed in Northern Ireland, but where our ability to have an influence on that system is so very constrained. Here we have published tax principles and we have published an annual tax work programme. Those of you who are interested in all of this can find all of that publicly available. I hope we are settling into a pattern now. This will soon be the third time we have published a tax work programme. I hope we will publish that again in January or February, and then I report on the tax work programme alongside the draft budget that is laid at the start of October. And you will see that on the day that I laid the draft budget this year, there was a report on the tax work programme during this calendar year. And I want to do it in that way because I think we make tax policy better if we are clear about what we are trying to achieve, if we are open in telling people what that programme is and the progress that we are making on it, and where we can engage people who have a direct interest in this field in helping us to discharge that work. And in that way, we establish an annual tax cycle here in Wales, in which people who are directly affected by the decisions have a clear and explicit sense of the timetable against which we make decisions, the parameters within which we are working, the point at which we will report on it, and crucially, therefore understand better the opportunities that they have to work with us to do things better here in Wales. Now, today we're going to be focusing on one particular strand in that wider fiscal position. And it is what was at the time a rather obscure part of the Wales Act 2014, because tucked away in it is the ability for us to proceed with Wales-only taxes. Now, it was both obscure and, if I'm truthful, I think rather unhelpfully described power, because it's a power for us to ask Westminster to hand the power down to us to then develop a Welsh-only idea. So you can see there are lots of steps in this journey, many of them not directly in our own hands, but in the way that I think of particular tasks as falling to particular periods in the Assembly's development. It seemed to me when I became Finance Minister that it was an important part of this Assembly term's responsibilities to test that machinery, to establish it in this Assembly term, because once we've got the machinery up and working and have proved how it can be put to work, then I think there will be bigger possibilities for the future. And in many ways, the vacant land tax is the guinea pig in all of that. It's the very first idea. We are sending down this track and we are making the track in front of the idea. So, you know, every time we take the idea one step further, we're having to dig the road in front of it to try to see how that idea can be brought about. Now, some of you will know that we started with a conversation with people in Wales about all of this. Did people feel there was an appetite for developing Wales-only taxes? And if they did, what sort of ideas would they find attractive? And I had a rare, probably unique in my experience at least, moment. I'm standing on my feet in the Assembly in July of last year, and I'm making a statement on this idea that we would test this machinery and to create new ways of taking money out of the pockets of people in Wales. And as I am talking, my screen, because you know we've all got computers in front of us in the Assembly, I can see on my screen that as I am on my feet, there are emails coming in from people in Wales giving me ideas as to how we could develop new taxes in Wales. It always takes me a bit by surprise that there are people watching what we do in the Assembly. But the fact that not only were people watching what I was saying, but that they were on their computer sending in ideas to me while I was still on my feet making this statement really did take me aback. And we had an astonishingly rich period over that summer and into the autumn of last year, when over 60 ideas were sent in by citizens in Wales. Lots of interest in schools, with groups of school students, discussing this in classes, writing letters on behalf of themselves and others. And that led me to publish a shortlist of 4 ideas, a social care levy based on further work by Jerry Hotham in that area, a plastics tax, astonishingly powerfully supported, particularly by young people. And if you were doing this simply on a sort of opinion poll voting basis, undoubtedly the one that had the strongest support from members of the public. A tourism tax at a local area, providing local authorities with a permissive power to create a tourism tax in their own areas, and a vacant land tax. Now, in February of this year, I said that I had decided that a vacant land tax was the best one to test the machinery. And I just want to keep emphasizing that there were 2 things that I was trying to balance. One, the importance of the idea, and wanting to take forward an idea that had a genuine policy relevance to us in Wales, but also an idea that would allow me to try this new machinery out for the first time. And some of those other ideas fell by the wayside, not because they are not ideas that I am keen to pursue, but, for example, I came to believe that a social care levy was too big an idea, too important an idea that would need more development. And if I tried to test this new way of doing things with that, it might just crash the machinery because the idea itself is so big. On a plastics tax, the fact that the Chancellor in his budget in November last year announced that there would be a call for evidence to the UK Treasury. I was afraid that the UK government would say, oh, we can't take this forward because we're doing work on it ourselves, and we will be stalled in developing the machinery. And a vacant land tax, I came to believe, was the best combination of an idea that was important and proportionate to the task, because it is a clear and specific tax. It's focused on a particular policy dilemma, that of how we can promote the supply of land for housing and regeneration. And it is a tax focused on changing behaviours rather than simply raising revenue. And it is at the heart of a policy conundrum that is important here in Wales but across the United Kingdom. When I was with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury yesterday, we had a very useful discussion about the vacant land tax, both in agreeing where we had got in developing the machinery between us, but also exploring how it might fit in with a wider UK set of actions, which the Treasury is, I think, genuinely keen to lead, as to how we can make sure that land is available and then used for key public policy purposes in the housing field, and how it can do more to support regeneration objectives. So let me be clear again at this point that the objective of a vacant land tax is absolutely not to make life more difficult for the majority of responsible businesses and landowners who do the important work of developing land for commercial or residential use. The aim is to bring about change in the behaviour of a minority of people who tie up land that could be used to the benefit of people and of communities. And I don't think there is any doubt that this is a genuine problem. I do hear from people who say, oh, where's the problem? What are you trying to solve here? If you look at the evidence from other parts of the United Kingdom, if you look at what the Chancellor said in his budget last year about the gap in London alone between planning permissions granted and developments actually taking place, if you look at the work that he has then set in hand, and we will see further coming through the review that the Chancellor has set in hand, if you look at the work of our own stalled sites fund here in Wales, there is an issue, and it is a serious issue, of land where the public has done all the work that falls to the public in providing all the necessary planning permissions and other consents that mean that that piece of land is ready for development, and yet the land stands there with nothing going on. And that's what the vacant land tax is designed to tackle. It is not aimed at pieces of land where those permissions do not exist. It is not aimed at pieces of land where there are other barriers in the path of developers who are working hard to eliminate those barriers. It is designed to address those instances where everything that is needed to bring that land into productive use has been secured, and where the public purse has played its part in making sure that those permissions are extant, and yet the land is not productively being used. And that is in nobody's interests here in Wales, and it certainly does not give the public a return which I believe they are entitled to have as a result of the effort that has been made on their behalf. Why does that happen? Well, there is land banking. There are organisations who sit on pieces of land simply in order to prevent others from being able to use it. And there is land speculation. There are people who would rather sit on the land and hope that the rising value of it as a result of the permissions that the public has provided will allow them to sell that land and make a profit as a result of that speculation. And those are the behaviours that we are hoping that a vacant land tax will help us to address here in Wales. Now we have examples elsewhere to draw on, and we are particularly lucky to have close cooperation from the Republic of Ireland, both at ministerial level and at very senior official level as well. So I have met in the Republic with people whose job it has been to design their vacant sites levy and to talk to them about the way that they are tackling this issue there. It's not a pick up and drop model. We know that you can't do things in that way, but you can learn lessons. You can learn some very important lessons that we then can use to tailor any vacant land tax to our circumstances here in Wales. So the Republic's vacant sites levy is there to encourage urban renewal and the redevelopment of sites, particularly in their context, left empty following the 2007-8 financial crisis. As in our case, their focus is not on raising revenue, but on incentivising development of residential land and regeneration more broadly. For those of you who don't follow these things as closely as I have to, let me say to you that the Republic has a four-stage process. It has a 2-year window before any vacant sites levy is charged. The first stage is that local authorities identify and then register vacant sites. And one of the things that I think they have been taken by surprise at is that this levy turns out to be an enormous popular success. So the way that local authorities are being able to populate their register is that citizens contact them and say, there's a piece of land vacant at the end of our village or at the end of our street and nothing is happening to it. And in fact, they don't say nothing is happening to it. What they say is that because nothing is happening to it, that land becomes an eyesore, it becomes a target for dumping of rubbish, it drags down the rest of the locality and so on. And it is citizens who are helping local authorities to do the job of identifying and registering these sites. If after 12 months that land is still sitting there idle, local authorities notify landowners that their sites have been included on the register. So at that point, landowners have a choice. They can take action or they can just allow their land to sit on the register. It's only after another 12 months, so you get a further 12 months after that again to take some action, that the local authority levies a charge. And in the first year of a charge, it's to be 3%. If nothing happens now, we've got 3 years of this piece of land with all the permissions it needs to do something worthwhile, sitting there doing nothing worthwhile, then for the first time you get a 3% tax on it, and that's a tax of the site's market value, and that rises to 7% in the second year. Now, it's early days in the Republic, but I think that is a proportionate system. It gives people plenty of time to take action to avoid the tax, and that's what the tax is designed to do. They don't want to collect 7%. They want the land to be used and for the levy to be an extra incentive to do that. They've built into it a number of wide-ranging and legitimate reasons for a landowner's lack of development, land contamination, the lack of a resale market, and so on. And they built into it clear avenues for appeal at each stage of the process. So just as we intend, they are clear that the levy is not intended to be a punitive measure. It is not intended to try and single out people for opprobrium. It is intended to add to the repertoire of things that collectively we are able to do to drive out better results for the whole of the public. And as I said, here in the United Kingdom, we will learn the lessons of the Letwin review that the Chancellor has set in hand to make sure that we design our vacant land tax in that wider UK context. And locally, again, I want to be completely clear with people that we will take this forward, if we can, very much through engagement with those who have a stake in these businesses and can help us to design the measure in a way that delivers the benefits we are confident that can be delivered while eliminating any unintended consequences. Where are we with all of this then? Well, as I said, the first stage in this process is that we have to draw down the power from the UK government in order to allow us to bring forward proposals of this sort. I was very anxious that we avoided the difficulties of the old ELCO process that Leighton will remember all too well, which was the earliest days of the Assembly acquiring lawmaking powers. I have tried to be as clear as I can with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury that it is not her business to take an interest in the policy matters. It's not for the UK government to decide to give us the power if they like what we're going to do with it. Their job is to test whether this is a power that is genuinely in the devolved area, that we are not going to use it in a way that would affect UK-wide tax receipts, and that there are not unintended consequences at a UK level. And I am actually pleased to say that those discussions with the UK government have been quite productive, that I jointly signed with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury a protocol for this earlier this year, in which the Treasury will look at the things that are genuinely relevant to the Treasury, and so long as we can satisfy them on those tests, then the power will come to Wales. We're in the sort of final straight of that first part of the process. I hope that by the start of next year, we will have passed all the tests which it is fair for the Treasury to lay down. I'm confident we can do that. And then it would be for the Chief Secretary to lay orders in Council at both Houses of Parliament, and then the power will come to Wales. And when the power comes to Wales, it is not my intention to introduce the day after a vacant land tax to the floor of the Assembly. My intention will be, when we've got the power, then to do some further detailed policy development work, and as I say, to do that very much in a way that will involve those who have an interest in it here in Wales. To do it, for example, through the tax advisory group that we set up, to do it with a tax practitioners forum that we work closely with. You know, that includes all the representatives of the organisation you'd expect, the CBI, the Federation of Small Businesses, the Institute of Directors, the Welsh Local Government Association, and so on. But to go beyond that in the specifics of a vacant land tax, to make sure that our thinking is located firmly in the wider context of land and property taxation in Wales and in housing policy more widely. Let me end then by just widening back the focus again in that way. I started by trying to paint something of the broad context in which a vacant land tax comes to be part of public debate here in Wales. I've tried to say something to you both about the process through which this tax might come about and the considerations that will lie behind it. But just to broaden the focus out for the last few moments of what I have to say, to be clear that we will go about designing, and if we are in a position to delivering a vacant land tax in Wales in a way consistent with the principles I set out earlier. We will try and do it in a way where we are as explicit as possible with people who have an interest about what we are trying to achieve. We will try to do it in a way that brings people around the table together here in Wales to share expertise, to make sure that, as I say, if there are ideas we have not thought of or consequences of which we need to be aware that those are explicitly put to us. And only then will we start the parliamentary process where a bill is put in front of the National Assembly and scrutinised in the way that that would be. If I am very lucky, and if all the things fall in our way, we will be able to do this within the rest of this Assembly term. And then I think we will together have succeeded in doing something quite important here in Wales. We will have succeeded in taking a relatively obscure power, that we will have designed a system which we have tested with the UK government and shown that it can be made to work. That we will have demonstrated that we have ideas that we can use to turn those powers into something real, and that we will have worked together to design and deliver something that is of genuine public policy relevance and worthwhileness here in Wales. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you all very much indeed.